All right, great. Thank you so much, Cheryl and Gary and everyone. It's really nice to be here with you this morning. Again, my name is Amy Tristan. I am the Volunteer and Outreach Manager at the English Empowerment Center. I am originally from upstate New York. I grew up in a really vibrant college town of Ithaca, New York, and I moved down here, quite a while ago, seeking milder weather. So really happy to sort of have, developed some deep roots here. My husband and I have two teenagers. They go to high school in Fairfax County. So we've lived in Reston now for about 20 years. I am, the volunteer and outreach manager at EEC. I've been on staff for about 6 years. Prior to that, my background is really in early childhood education. So I'd worked with preschoolers and young families for many years and kind of decided to make a change and kind of shifted to working with adults. And I have really, really enjoyed that change. Working with adults and still working with a lot of their families by extension has been really rewarding. So I have some slides that I want to share with you today. Let me load that up. Right, hopefully you can see my screen, Gary. Is that good?
Mhm.
Almost?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, so we firmly believe at the English Empowerment Center that literacy is a survival skill. And so, our mission has been the same for quite a long time. It's to teach adults the basic skills of reading, writing, speaking, and understanding English so that they can access employment and educational opportunities and more fully and equitably participate in the community. We recognize that people in this area who may have limited English skills or limited literacy skills may be struggling to survive every day, struggling to support their families, struggling to support their children in school, just struggling to kind of navigate this area. I think about, what it takes to survive in Northern Virginia. And when I moved here a couple of decades ago, I had a lot of tools in my toolbox. I could speak the language, I could read a map. I didn't have a smartphone at the time, but I could navigate this area pretty easily. I moved here for a job, so I had a job, an apartment, and even a group of friends kind of already lined up. But I sometimes think about what it would look like if I didn't have all of those things. And on top of that, maybe struggle to read and write and communicate, right? That would just add an extra layer of difficulty. And that's the reality for a lot of the students in our program. So I'm glad to kind of, illuminate this topic for you today. I am going to kind of keep an eye on the chat a little bit. And, if there are questions that come up, I'll pause periodically to respond to those. But I wanted to kind of start off by giving you some information really about kind of adult literacy overall in America. I think, there are about 1 in 5 adults in the US who struggle to read basic sentences. And that works out to be about 44 million people who fall into that illiterate or functionally illiterate category. And then 43% of adults with the lowest literacy levels live in poverty. So this is, it is a problem in Northern Virginia. It's a big problem overall nationwide. I think it's something that a lot of people in the field of adult education, in the Department of Education, are really focusing on. There have been some tremendous changes in our culture and in our education system over the past several, decades. And so that has been a positive change, but still there's a lot of work to be done. So just to kind of give you a snapshot of what the impact of adult illiteracy is, I want to talk about sort of these categories and how, illiteracy impacts these things. So when we're thinking about health, there are some studies that have been done, particularly one by the American Journal of Health that reports that the inability to read and understand health information accounts for billions in healthcare costs each year. So studies have linked low literacy levels to difficulty, of course, reading the doctor's instructions, kind of following a health protocol, and knowing when to follow up, those sorts of things. So if there's a disconnect in the ability to kind of understand instructions, then it can create massive ripple effects for our health and the health of families. And so there might be delayed diagnoses or things like that will come up. So a study by Harvard found that people who had less than 12 years of education had a lifespan that was significantly shorter than those with more education. So overall, it has a big impact. When we think about employment, I think it's pretty intuitive that there's a strong connection between education and employment. And a lack of education usually results in pretty severely limited economic opportunities and job opportunities. The National Council for Adult Learning points to annual costs of $225 billion in non-productivity in the workforce. And so that's an incredible loss of tax revenue that's tied to unemployment and low literacy. And then poverty. In this country, as that previous slide showed, 43% of adults with the lowest literacy levels live in poverty. So we see this in Arlington County, we see this in Fairfax County. Only about 4 to 8% of adults in those particular counties have less than a high school diploma. So overall, we're living in a fairly well-educated area, but there is still a pocket of the population that doesn't have a high school diploma or has an education that's less than the high school level. So that can really impact earning potential and job opportunities overall. And then, of course, that equals out to, potentially living in poverty. And then finally, a really sobering impact of illiteracy is the generational effect. Studies show that a mother's educational level is really the greatest determinant to her child's future academic success. This outweighs other factors. So it can sort of, if the parents are educated, if the parents are really invested in their child's education, that can sometimes cancel out the effects of poverty and other factors. So that literacy in families is really, really important. At the English Empowerment Center, we have a really vibrant family learning program, and that's the issue that we're trying to tackle with that program. So, I just wanted to kind of give you an overview of kind of really the significance of literacy and in our culture. Here in Northern Virginia, the median household income in Arlington and Fairfax County is right around $120,000. So this is a very affluent, overall fairly well-educated area. But for those who don't have a high school diploma or its equivalent, the ability to earn a livable wage is really difficult. So when we look at the foreign-born population, there's as much educational diversity as any group. So with more than about 60% holding a college degree. But, as you can see from some of the statistics here, 26% of Northern Virginia's population is foreign-born, and about 47%, so almost half of that population doesn't speak English at a functional level. And so when we think about what it takes to survive in this area and to kind of gain a foothold in the economy, to get a job, to support families, education, and specifically the ability to speak English is really key. So that kind of brings me to EEC. At EEC, at the English Empowerment Center, we firmly believe that literacy is a survival skill. So we are working with very beginning level English learners. So basically those who are at a 6th grade level or below. We were founded in the 1960s. We've been around for quite a long time. When we were founded in 1962, the name was the Literacy Council of Northern Virginia. So that may be a name that you recognize. We just last year went through a name change and a rebranding process. And so that's been really exciting. But we've been in this area for quite a long time. And we were founded in the 60s by a group of individuals who were alarmed at the number of adults, specifically in the city of Alexandria. That's kind of where this started. But they were alarmed by the number of adults who were functionally illiterate. And so they started a large-scale tutoring program. So volunteers were matched with learners to work on those basic skills of reading and writing. And then over time, more and more English learners started coming to the English Empowerment Center to get help to learn the language. So they were matched with tutors, and that program continued for quite a while. And then in the last few decades, we've really transitioned to a classroom program with many different locations and a focus on teaching English as a second language. So today, that is really our focus. We've served more than 55,000. I actually think, it's a little bit closer to 60,000 now, but we've served a lot of adults in this area. We're one of just a few nonprofits that meets federal education standards. So that means a number of things, but primarily it means that our programs are quite rigorous. They're really designed to meet the needs of adult learners in this area, to make sure that they have the tools that they need and that they have the language that they need to get a job or get a better job or to support their families. And we also do pre-testing and we do post-testing. So all of that is really important for reporting those outcomes and making sure that our programs are as strong as possible. And then you can see here on the slide, this is still our mission today, to really teach those basic skills. And the piece that is really key in our mission is that access to employment and educational opportunities. The hope is that our programs will really open doors for our students. This kind of gives you a snapshot of of the population that we're serving. So every year we work with about 1,900 adult learners who come from all over the world. They represent 90 different countries. They speak more than 50 different languages. You can see on this slide the top 5 countries that we see, the top 5 languages that we hear. The truth is that our students have come from a lot of different places and have had there's a lot of diversity in terms of education and employment history. And so we are really set up to support learners, from wherever they come from. All of our learners, as I mentioned, do speak English at a 6th grade level or below. So we are really serving the very beginning levels in English. The majority of our students are young adults between the ages of 25 and 44. Many of them have young children at home, and their goal is to learn English so that they can better support their children in school. Almost 3/4 are women, and almost 40% have less than 9 years of formal education. So some of them may not be able to read or write in their native language. And as you remember, from our origins in the city of Alexandria, working with native English speakers who struggled with basic literacy, we have a lot of tools and a lot of training for that type of situation. So if someone comes to us and they don't know how to read and write in their native language, they may be learning English and they may be learning how to read or write for the first time as an adult. And so that is really our strength. That's what we are able to kind of contribute to this population. We have a lot of resources and a lot of support for someone in that situation. But some of our learners have master's degrees or professional degrees from their home country, and they are interested in working in that field or a similar field in the US. And so one of the things that they need to do to achieve that goal is to make sure that their English level is high enough that they can either achieve those credentials here, or they can take other classes to kind of boost their resume and work in that field. So this is a big part of what we are doing. So I kind of wanted to share a little bit more about a few specific students. First, Sajida is a married mother of 4 in her 30s from Afghanistan. She took classes with us for several years. She actually speaks several languages, and she is literate in her native language of Dari. So this is noteworthy because a number of our female students from Afghanistan cannot read or write because they were not permitted to go to school under the Taliban. So some of the students that are coming to us from Afghanistan can read and write. They may have law degrees, they may be doctors. There's another part of the population that's coming that may not be literate in their native language. And so when they come to the US, they have the opportunity to not only learn English, but also learn how to read or write. So Sajida's husband was a highly educated translator who worked for the US military, and he was granted a special immigrant visa to come here along with his family for safety. So because of her status, which is similar to a refugee, that qualifies her for certain supports, like language classes and all of that. So she was referred to our Destination Workforce Program, which I'll talk about shortly. She's just a really warm, very generous person who's always willing to help other classmates, especially those who struggle with basic literacy. I wanted to share the story of Bernard. So Bernard is in his 40s. He's originally from Senegal. He was a business owner there. And as an entrepreneur, he really wanted to kind of start his own business in the US and, learn more about business and economics and all of that. He had applied for a spot at Nova, in a program at Nova, but was told that his English level and especially his writing skills weren't quite up to the level that they were looking for in order for him to enroll in this program. So he reached out to us and he was enrolled in our writing class and other classes to kind of strengthen those skills. He, to kind of make ends meet, was working. He had taken on a part-time job, and then he took on another part-time job, and then another part-time job. And so what he was doing was taking our morning class, and then he would go to jobs, 1, 2, and 3 after that. We're not sure when he slept, but he was just extremely hardworking and really dedicated to his studies, knowing that he had this goal of taking classes at Nova and eventually becoming a business owner in this country. Miss Zenaida is she's 78 years old. She's originally from Venezuela, and she was a school teacher for her whole adult life. And then when she retired, she decided to move to Virginia to be a little closer to her daughter and her son-in-law and her granddaughters. So the problem was that her granddaughters don't speak a lot of Spanish, and she really wanted to have a relationship with them. So she started taking classes with the English Empowerment Center, really with that particular goal in mind. to be able to better communicate with her granddaughters and some of her extended family members. And so she has really become very, very special to us. And we just love having her. She's in our classroom program. Sometimes she stops in our office to just chat or help out with things. But anyway, these are sort of just 3 out of many, many, many students that I just wanted to share a little bit about their story with you, so you can kind of get a sense for the students that we are serving and some of the backgrounds that they have. All right. Gary, are we doing okay? Do we have any questions in the chat?
Yeah, there was a question or a comment that illiteracy and poverty includes challenges of money management, including savings, credit, investment, even at low levels. Do you guys address that, or is there a parallel, numeracy empowerment center that tries to teach people how to handle the banking system and credit cards and, how to avoid getting scammed every time you turn around?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, education is a big part of that, sort of understanding how the banking system works, how to not get scammed, as you mentioned. We talk about that quite often in our classes. Yeah, it's a really complicated topic, and there are some other local nonprofits who are really skilled at teaching those issues. In fact, there's Bright Paths has a financial empowerment program. And they work really closely with individual learners to kind of address their needs. And there's an education piece there. There's a lot of support. So yeah, I think that's a really great point, because I think if you're not familiar with how the system works, you could be really vulnerable. You could be really open to, potentially losing your shirt or getting into some big trouble. And it's just really hard to know how to kind of wisely invest your money and make sure that that money grows. So yeah, I think that's a great point, Mike. Yeah. All right, well, I think I'll keep going with to kind of give you an overview of our academic program. So, research has really determined that small group instruction focused on rapid skill development is really the most effective way to teach English. We used to do a lot of tutoring, we still do some one-on-one tutoring, but there's a lot of magic when you get a group of learners together who maybe come from different backgrounds and speak different languages, and they're in a classroom, which is really an immersion experience, and they're learning English together, they're speaking English, they're hearing English, and so that is really the focus of our program. We have a number of classes that are affordable, convenient, intensive, and standards-based. So we ask learners to pay just $85. That's the tuition payment for a full semester-long class. That includes textbooks and workbooks and supplemental services like tutoring, assessments. So, we try to make sure that those classes are as affordable as possible. The reality is that the cost for our organization per student is more in the range of $400 to $500. So we are already doing a lot of fundraising to make sure that that cost for students is as low as possible. And I'm really proud to say that we will never turn someone away for inability to pay. So if they come to us and they say that $85 is just not in the budget, we will work with them to determine what they can afford. So if that means they pay just $20 or even $10 for the class, that's fine, and we will apply scholarship funds to the rest. Our classes are convenient, so they're located all over Northern Virginia. We also have classes online, which are, of course, accessible to most people. And we've even started adding students who are outside of the Northern Virginia area. They might know somebody who took a class with us, and then the word has spread. And so now we have learners who live across the country. And so that's really exciting to see that that reach is starting to grow. But our classes are in libraries and rec centers and senior centers and, even some sort of community spaces. We have classes at local schools and universities. So our goal is to really make sure that those classes are as convenient as possible, perhaps on public transportation routes or even walkable. Our classes are intensive, so they're meeting 2 to 3 times a week for 2 hours. Our teachers are always assigning homework and really encouraging learners to practice speaking English, reading, and writing English in between class times to get as much practice as they possibly can. And as far as our standards-based classes, we really closely follow state and federal guidelines for education, so that's really important. We have beginning English programs. That's really kind of the bulk of what we're doing. Most of the students enrolled in our program are part of one of those classes, the beginning English language and literacy classes. We offer those classes on 3 levels, level 1, level 2, and level 3. So it's ranging from very, very beginning to high intermediate or so. The classes are, meeting several times a week for, 2 hours. So that roughly works out to about 4 to 6 hours of instruction, plus homework time and all of that. Our classes meet at a variety of times. So we have some morning classes, some afternoon classes, and then a good number of evening classes. For our family learning program, in contrast to the beginning English classes, which are leveled, the family learning program is a multi-level class. So it's really designed for parents who want to be more engaged in their children's education and to learn that language that they will need to have a conversation with their child's teacher or to communicate with the school registrar or the school administrators, to understand the instructions that are coming home from the pediatrician, that sort of thing. So the family learning program is offered in partnership with a number of different schools around the area. And while parents are in their class, the children are receiving some literacy instruction and help with homework in an adjacent room. So we're really trying to meet the needs of the whole family with that family learning program. For skills-based classes, we have some writing classes and conversation classes. And then destination workforce, I think I have a slide about that. Yeah, so this is a really exciting initiative. So we partnered with businesses in this area to provide intensive industry-specific language classes. So in each case, employers have set aside time and space for their employees to take these classes right there on site. So you can see in this picture, this is an example of one of the classes that we taught at a local hotel. So in the early afternoon, when there was a little bit of a little bit of downtime for some of the staff members, their employer would send them to our class, which was in one of their conference rooms, and they would study English for 2 hours. And we worked really closely with that employer to understand the context, to understand the language that the employees would need to know. And we worked with them to kind of develop that curriculum collaboratively. So it's just been a really exciting program. We've worked with some hotels, some restaurants, some universities around the area, and we've seen some outstanding outcomes. Students report just greater confidence in being able to do their job and communicate with coworkers or supervisors or customers or clients. And we've even seen a number of our students get promoted, which is really exciting. We also have a few classes called English for Work. And that is a class for a job seeker or someone who's looking to kind of, change fields, get away from a survival job and into a job that is a little bit more sustainable. So the English for Work program is a really popular class. Students will take that to kind of understand a little bit more about American workplace culture, what it takes to apply for a job and go through an interview process and all of that. So that Destination Workforce is just a really fantastic program that's, I think, really meeting the needs of learners around our area. So next I want to talk about our volunteers. So we have a relatively small staff. So there's just 16 of us on staff. Our headquarters are in Falls Church, Virginia. But, and every year we work with about 2,000 learners or so. So there's really no way that we could do what we do without the support of many, many, many volunteers. So we have this extremely strong and dedicated network of volunteers. Last year, they actually provided closer to 25,000 hours of support, which is really incredible. Volunteers are serving as teachers, tutors, testers. They're serving on our board. They're doing outreach for us. They're providing some behind the scenes support like material prep and all of that. So that is really important. And that's really the primary way that we accomplish our mission. So the basic requirements for volunteers is that they must be 18 or older. So they need to be adults. They need to have at least a high school diploma, be able to speak English at a fluent level, and have a high degree of cultural sensitivity. That's really important to us. So some people ask, is it crucial that I have teaching experience to get involved with us? And the short answer is no. So, we do provide a lot of training and support for our volunteers. And a lot of volunteers will start off as a class aide. And after a couple of semesters, sort of working closely with a teacher, they might decide to take on a class of their own. And so we love to see that when that happens. I think teaching a class is a significant time commitment and a significant commitment of effort. We provide, of course, teachers' manuals and curricular guides and all sorts of resources that teachers can use. But it does take us a good amount of time each week to plan those lessons and to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the students. So we're very, very grateful for all of the volunteers who choose to serve our organization in this way. This shows kind of a breakdown of some of our volunteer positions. So on the instructional side, we have classroom teachers, classroom aides and tutors. So the teachers, aides, and tutors all take the same training. We offer it several times a year. It's called Adult ESOL Instructor Basics. The next session will be coming up in January, right before our spring session. So that training, it's a 4-hour training that really kind of jumpstarts the learning for this group of volunteers. And then after that, we have kind of some ongoing continuing education. We have lots of other trainings, webinars, things like that we'll push out to the team. But that's a great place for people to start. On the support side, we have volunteers who do all of our pre-testing and post-testing. So we have trained them to deliver an assessment called Best Plus 2.0. It's developed by the Center for Applied Linguistics. And so they will go to registration events and they will do the pre-testing right there on site for us. And then at the end of the semester, they will go to our class sites to do the post-testing. So that helps us, of course, measure the progress of each individual student. We have volunteers who serve as student advisors. These are similar to academic advisors. They're really providing a lot of support and encouragement for our students. And especially for those higher level students, they get them thinking about what's next. So after someone goes through, let's say, our beginning English program, do they want to take classes at Nova? Do they want to take some industry specific training? What other resources are out there? How can they continue their learning? So those student advisors are really key for getting those conversations started and providing some support for the students in our program. Registration assistants, office support, mock interviewers, those are all volunteer roles that are really key for supporting our operations and for helping students accomplish their goals. We have a large network of volunteers who hear about our mission and then go into their communities and share that with other people. So most of our students hear about our programs through word of mouth. So, and then of course, there's always a lot of transition in and out of this area. So, we're kind of always putting that information out there that our classes are convenient and affordable and available because we want as many people as possible to know that we exist and that our classes are available. So that network of outreach volunteers is really key. That might look like flyering or going to a community fair to hand out information to attendees, showing at a multicultural festival to talk to people, that sort of thing. So we do go to as many community events as we can to kind of get the word out about our classes and our programs. Let's see. Yeah, so it's just some upcoming dates that I wanted to share with you. Our fall semester we're kind of quickly approaching the end. So we're going to go until December 15th. Each semester is about 12 weeks long. So it's 12 weeks long in the fall, 12 weeks long in the spring. And then we have a shorter summer semester, just about 6 or 8 weeks. But that's kind of our annual rhythm. So we will be very busy registering students for our spring semester in January. So we will set aside 3 or 4 weeks where we're sort of all hands on deck. We are going out to a lot of different locations that we've advertised to learners. They can come and they can register for class right on site. So they'll fill out some forms, they'll take a placement test, and they can enroll in the class right there. So that will be really where we will be focused in January of 2024. The Adult ESOL Instructor Basics training that I mentioned, I believe it's scheduled for Saturday, January 20th. So that is sort of an in-person workshop at the James Lee Community Center in Falls Church. The second part of it will be maybe a week later. It will be a Zoom session. And the idea is that we want to give our instructors a sense for what it looks like in the classroom, sort of working with learners, some tools that they can use, some techniques that they can use. And then that second part, which will be online, kind of goes over the Zoom platform and all sorts of tech tools that we can use and ways that we can meet students' needs online. And then finally, I think we have a tentative date for Thursday, April 11th for our Taste of Literacy fundraiser. So we started doing a Taste of Literacy fundraiser a couple of years ago. It's just been a great way to it's really a friend raiser. So we have been able to raise some, much needed funds for our scholarship program and also, make connections with people in the area who are really committed to adult education and basic literacy. So I kind of, as I'm wrapping up, I wanted to kind of circle back to, some of the profiles that I shared a little while ago with Sajida, Bernard, and Zenaida. So, Sajida, she had started with our program before the pandemic. This was probably about 2018 that she came to us. So she has gone through our program and now she is working as an instructional assistant in a school system. So she's working closely with teachers in the classroom. And she's also become a really important part of that staff, working with and liaisoning with families from Afghanistan, because she has those language skills and that kind of cultural sensitivity to work with a lot of families from Afghanistan and that part of the world. So she is doing really well. Her family's doing really well. Her son is just about to graduate from high school, which is really something, and that's something that we will celebrate along with her. Bernard is taking classes at Nova, so he has reached that goal. We're really proud of him that he kind of continued to pursue that goal and continued to work hard, even though it meant working many jobs and getting very little sleep for several years. But that's what he's doing today. And so we're also really, really proud of him. And then finally, Miss Zenaida, I mentioned that she is the 78-year-old from Venezuela who had moved here to be closer to her family. I'm just really delighted to report that she has a fantastic relationship with her teenage granddaughters. She's able to kind of relate to them in a way that she wasn't able to relate to them a few years ago. And what's really exciting is that when she started taking classes with us, she set a goal to gain US citizenship. And so she has been studying for that exam for several years, and she's been practicing her English, knowing that that interview is coming up. And just a few weeks ago, she passed the citizenship exam, and a few days later, she was sworn in as a US citizen. So this is really, really exciting. Next year, she'll get a US passport, and she will be able to finally travel to visit her family members who live all over the world, some of whom she has not seen in many, many, many years. So we are thrilled with her, and we have been celebrating that incredible victory. And I think a lot of our volunteers and certainly our staff will tell you that, this work is it's so encouraging, it's so gratifying, it's so rewarding to see these small victories, to see students working so very hard to support their families and to learn English, knowing that that is the way that they will be able to achieve their goals. So we're really glad that they have found us, knowing that this is a safe place to land. And that we have created a community where they can learn and find friends and friendship and community and all of that. So I just wanted to share that with you. I think finally, I wanted to throw my contact information here. If you have any questions or you'd like to connect with me, my email is here. It's atristan@englissempowermentcenter.org. If you'd like to stay in touch with us, I'd encourage you to go to our website, englissempowermentcenter.org. And at the very bottom, you can sign up for our quarterly newsletter. So every quarter, we'll send out announcements about events, some trainings that are coming up, and then stories, of course, about our students and our volunteers and our teachers. So if you'd like to get that newsletter, I'd encourage you to sign up for that there on our website. And there's also a lot of other really great information on our website. So if you wanted to kind of learn more, you could find yourself there at that website and check out some of those resources. So hopefully, Gary, the timing is good. I think I could probably stop sharing, and if we have any questions, I'd be happy to answer some of those.
Got a few. One of them is, do you need more volunteers? And how do you go about finding volunteers?
Yeah, it's a good question. We do a lot of outreach, of course, to find students, but we do a lot of outreach to find volunteers. So we're sort of always glad to add volunteers to our team. And as I mentioned, there's a variety of different ways that someone could serve. They could be a teacher or a class aide or a tutor, or, help out occasionally with ad hoc projects, that sort of thing. So yes, we are always looking for more volunteers. I think we are going to be adding some more classes in the spring. So that will mean that we will need to add at least a dozen or more volunteers to support those classes. And of course, I think as people are traveling more and, all of that, we are finding the need for substitute class aides and substitute teachers is quite high. So even if somebody can't commit to a full semester, if they wanted to kind of help out occasionally, kind of filling in as a sub, just kind of coming in and going with the flow and working with the group of students, that would fulfill a great need as well. And so I see the question too, are there English empowerment centers in other parts of the country? Yeah, that's a great question too. We started in the 1960s as the Literacy Council of Northern Virginia. And around that same time, there were a lot of literacy councils that popped up all over the country. So there was a lot of attention, I think, put on the public school system and the number of adults in this country that maybe had dropped out of school, maybe had been forced to drop out of school because their families needed them at home, or maybe they had an undiagnosed learning disability or something like that that prevented them from picking up those basic skills in school. So in the 1960s and kind of going on from there, there were a lot of literacy councils that were popping up, and many of them still exist today. So to kind of depending on the demographics in that particular region, the focus might be native English speakers and basic adult literacy, or they might do a little bit of both. So some organizations, especially in Virginia near Richmond, or in Winchester or Fredericksburg, some of those organizations do about half and half. So they work with about half native English speakers and about half of their population speaks English as a second language. So they're doing a little bit of both. For us, about 98% of our learners are speakers of other languages, but some of, these other centers, the makeup of their students might look a little bit different. Yeah, that's a great question.
Okay, next question is, what is the taste of literacy? What are you tasting?
Yeah, that's so the Taste of Literacy, it was just a fun name. It's either a breakfast or a lunch. So we're enjoying good food and some friendship and community there. So we started calling it a Taste of Literacy a couple of years ago, and the name just stuck.
One thing I wanted to ask was, most or almost all of what you've talked about is focused on literacy as a way to further employment and access to government services and things like that. Is there any aspect of what you're doing that's focused on reading for pleasure? Because you touched early on about generational illiteracy. And I know in my own family, my parents were big readers for pleasure. And that became something that rubbed off on all the kids, getting to go to the library with mom and pick out books and things like that. Is there any aspect of that to what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really great question. We do have a few book clubs. And so we've gotten some students together to all read the same book and kind of talk about it, really just for fun and, for fellowship. In our family learning program, we also have a big emphasis on reading with kids, reading as a family. Right now, there's a big push amongst early childhood educators to get preschoolers, really from infancy all the way until they start kindergarten, to read at least 1,000 books, which is ambitious. But if you're reading, many books a day to your kids, you just before bed, sometimes if you sit down with a toddler, you could read 10, 12 picture books or board books before they go to bed. So, the idea is that we want to get families reading together as much as possible. So it's something that we talk about in our classes quite a bit. How could we be reading individually? How can we be reading with our families and our young children? In our classes, we want our teachers to get to know their students and to find out what their students are interested in. And so that's a big component of our classroom program too, understanding those individuals' goals, but also their backgrounds, their interests and things like that. So we can bring in a lot of materials and resources that will kind of align with that student's interest and maybe get them really excited about learning or reading more on a particular topic. And so that's, I think, one way that we get students excited about learning and keep them engaged.
So Mike has also said, if you haven't seen it already, check out The Education of Hyman Kaplan, originally in the Saturday Evening Post in the 1950s, and then published as a book. So
I haven't heard of it. Yeah, I'll check it out. Thank you.
yeah. And we've got a question. What's the percentage of individuals for whom you offer classes who are over 55?
Yeah, that's also a good question. So I mentioned that the majority of our students are young adults between 25 and 44, but the kind of next biggest demographic is 55 plus. And it's always interesting, when people come to register for a class, we ask them some questions about, their background, maybe how long they've lived in the US. And there are a number of people who have been in the US for quite a while, maybe 20 plus years. And because they've been raising kids, or they've been kind of focused on working maybe in an area where they can speak their native language and they don't necessarily need to speak a lot of English because they're a little bit linguistically isolated, but they have a community of speakers who know that same language around them. But maybe when kids go to college or kind of kids move away and it opens life up a little bit to some new possibilities. Some people have kind of deferred that goal of learning English until the kids have gone to college or they've moved out. And so there's a good number of our students who are over the age of 55. Yeah. And so they have the time to dedicate now to their studies and really want to learn English so that they can better communicate with their neighbors, or access services, have conversations with doctors and all of that. So yeah, so that's, I would say, our next largest demographic.
You mentioned feedback that you're getting from your students, and I'm curious to know, do you ever do follow-up measures, 3, 4, 5 years after somebody's taken your classes to see whether what they've learned has kind of become a springboard to their English constantly improving, or do they reach a point where, okay, I can navigate in the world, I've got other things to worry about? Do you
Mhm.
have a sense of that?
Yeah, we do try to keep in touch with our students. So, they might have left our program a few years ago, but we keep in touch with them and they still get email communications from us. And we will periodically actually use some volunteers to do some phone banking for us, to kind of call students and just check in and find out what they're doing these days. And so that's a way that we are able to kind of follow up and see what some of those outcomes look like. That's how we were able to kind of find out that Bernard, is taking classes at Nova, and Sajida is working, in the school system and all of that. We also, so that's really important to us to kind of follow up with those students. We try to keep in touch with them on a Facebook group. We have an alumni group that people can access, and that's kind of a nice platform for sharing some stories and updates and all of that. And then, because we've been around for so long, we have sometimes seen the children of adults who have been part of our class circle back to volunteer with us because they know that their mother or their father or another relative took classes with us and kind of how that changed the trajectory of their family. And so now that they are an adult, and some of them, will come to us after they've already graduated from college or what have you, and they will join our program as a volunteer. So they have that perspective of, what it was like sort of growing up in a household with a family member who was struggling to learn English and really worked hard and dedicated themselves to that study and how that impacted their family. And then they want to give back. So sometimes we will hear about, kind of where a family went, several years later, because a family member has returned to become a volunteer with us, which is also really exciting.
Do you work with faith communities who may know folks who need your services or may hold an event to recruit volunteers?
Yes, yeah. So we're involved with a number of different church groups. The Lutheran Church in this area is really dedicated to working with refugees. And so we have partnered with them in a number of different instances. They will often have resource fairs and things like that at a number of different faith communities around the area. So that has been kind of a way to connect with people in different neighborhoods. So sometimes people will go to a local library to ask about English services, or sometimes they will go to their church, or sometimes churches that have multicultural congregations, will either have small programs or they will help do some outreach for us. And so that's been a way for us to kind of connect with some of these other populations. Yes, yeah.
But how do you handle it if somebody shows up speaking a language that you're completely unfamiliar with and their English is really, really poor? Do you try to find a translator to at least help jumpstart the process? Or is it total immersion? You're here, you're going to learn English.
Yeah, yeah. So at least initially, when someone's asking questions about our program and they're trying to kind of understand, what they need to do and what the steps are, we are really lucky to have a lot of multilingual volunteers on our team. So we really have at least all of those key languages covered. So from Korean to Vietnamese and Spanish, Dari, Pashto, Arabic, etc. And then, we even have some volunteers who speak, less common but still really important languages. So those volunteers can often help with that interpretation piece. Some of our teachers will rely on, Google Translate, tech tools that they have on their phone. They're always getting better and better about accurately translating things, for students. And then when they're in class, if someone is starting at a very, very beginning level, they might be able to say hello and thank you, and that's it. They're learning pretty quickly. It is an immersion experience, as I mentioned. There's a lot of collaboration and support in the classroom between students themselves. So there might be a student who speaks very little English, and they might be sitting next to somebody who speaks a little bit more than that, but they can kind of help each other. And if they speak the same native language, there might be some communication there in that native language to kind of, help each other go in the same direction. So we support that, and we want that to be the case. We want people to feel comfortable in our classroom because we know it's hard. I don't know if any of you have kind of studied a language as an adult. I've learned a little bit of Spanish as a kid, and I've come back to it as an adult. And it's so much harder than I remember. I think, when you're 12, 13, 14 years old, you can pick up a language really quickly. We have a staff member who came to this country when she was 6 years old from Somalia. And she started kindergarten in September, and by winter break, she was fluent. I mean, just incredible, right? Those minds are so flexible and like sponges. For adults, it's a little bit harder. And so, a lot of our volunteers recognize that, not only do our students have a lot going on, they have complicated lives. They're sometimes struggling with multiple jobs and, all of that. But they're really dedicating themselves to learning the language. So whatever we can do to help with that, we want to do that, provide that kind of support.
You collaborate with and conduct classes directly in local school systems?
Yes, we do collaborate with, and we do have a number of classes that meet in schools. So some of those classes are meeting in the evenings. So at a student's family, that kind of home base school. So ideally they could even walk there. So we've got a number of different family learning programs in schools. And then we also work with a couple of school districts who may refer students to us. So that's been really key for outreach and kind of helping to get out the information about our classes to those students who are really needing it.
You touched on this already, but the question was, do you use Google Translate very much? She just watched an postal employee, help a customer using Google Translate. Is that something you teach your students, hey, get this on your phone and here's how it works?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's a great tech tool, and I think it is becoming more common. It's becoming a little bit more accurate. I think even a few years ago we were a little bit unsure about how accurate it really was, but especially for certain languages, I think it's very accurate for Spanish. And so if someone is trying to communicate with someone who speaks in Spanish, that Google Translate tool is really key. It's a little bit less accurate with other languages, so sometimes we're careful, but I think it's a great tool. Yeah, and it just helps, especially out in the community, for this postal worker, that's a great way to kind of use technology to help communicate with someone. And there's also a lot of tech tools that people can use to jumpstart their learning and to do as homework. There's a lot of very adaptive apps, that will help a student work on the skills that they need to work on. And then that could even include speaking. So the tool will listen to them speak, and they will repeat phrases and things like that. So they can even work on a skill like that through Google Translate or some of the other apps that we can use. Yeah.
Do you guys ever play games like Scrabble and things like that involve making words?
Yeah, Scrabble is popular, bingo is popular, Pictionary is popular, charades is popular. We have some teachers who will even get students singing, that's part of their ritual, to sing a song, or to even listen to music. We've got some teachers who will, if their students are working on fluency, they will kind of bring in some songs that are really catchy and will help them sort of like understand the pattern of pronunciation and how syllables break and all of that. So music is also a part of our program too.
Okay. I was going to ask if a teacher notices a student that seems to be especially struggling, can they, grab another student and pull them aside and say, hey, could you buddy up with so and give them a little extra attention? It sounds like some of that happens organically, but is any of that ever directed?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, the other thing is that, we have a teacher who's leading instruction in each class. And then sometimes we will have 3 or 4 or even 5 class aides. And so in a classroom of 20 students, that ratio is really strong. So, those class aides can move around and offer help. If someone is really having difficulty, understanding an activity, there's some one-on-one attention that we can give that student. Or, we also have a lot of tutoring option, so that's an option for students who are enrolled in our program. If someone is, if class ends and, they still have some questions, or there was an activity or a topic that was covered that went maybe right over their head, they can meet with a tutor to get a little bit of extra help and try to catch up too. So that's another service that we offer to students. But I think in the classroom, we do a lot of activities where students are partnering with each other, but we also really encourage those aides to kind of move around the room and provide support, sort of looking for that universal look of confusion on faces, or maybe students who look like they might be lost or not understanding something, but they might be shy about raising their hand or asking a question. So those class aides are really key for providing that kind of support to the students in the classroom.
Any more questions, Gary?
No, I don't see any more.
Well, Amy, this has been very enlightening. I've been taking notes and adding questions and that. I've thought about the possibility of doing some kind of program on aging matters. And also I belong to a church in Arlington Ridge Road, and it's Lutheran. So I'm very familiar with Lutheran social services. And so I have a feeling I'll be back in touch with you. I wrote down your contact information. So I actually knew somebody who volunteered for the Literacy Council when it was still called the Literacy Council. So I did not know that you had changed names. So this is very interesting. And I think we'll be talking about that some more. So thank you so much.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. Thank you so much for, the community that you're building here. This is a wonderful group of friends and neighbors. So I'm very glad to be here with you this morning, and I really appreciate the opportunity. So thank you so much.
Yeah, it's nice to know, given the fact of how many different cultures we have in the Arlington area. And I'm also glad to hear that there are similar types of centers around the country. I think that's good to know as well. So okay, well, I think we are just very close to 10:59. So we're right on time here. So I want to thank everybody for joining us today. And next week, since it's probably going to be so close to Thanksgiving, our own ANV Executive Director, Wendy Zinker, will be here to talk about what's new at Arlington Neighborhood Village. So I'm sure that there will be lots of folks who tune in and we'll either want to hear information or maybe can give Wendy some feedback of things that hadn't been discussed at the recent missed the all hands meeting. So be sure and join us next week at 10 o'clock for coffee and conversation. And meanwhile, have a good week and hope to see you on Friday at the Thanksgiving event.